took me to Japan. And once I did my first Japanese woodblock print, I was hooked. Everyone is curious. I'm born and raised in Texas. I was born in Del Rio, raised primarily Uvalde, San Antonio, Gonzales. My heritage is German, Czech, a little bit of French, Central Texas. And I married my high school sweetheart, into Vietnam War, draft number 33, and bam, we were at Yokota Air Base, Japan for 4 years. I had a BFA from Sam Houston State, and I hit the ground running. I met a man who had been there since 1949. He actually worked with MacArthur in the turnover, and I started collecting antique Japanese woodblock prints. I had studied them in art history at Sam Houston State, but I had never held them in my hand. They are remarkable pieces of paper. Claude Holman, my dear, dear friend who's passed, taught me pretty much everything I know about antique prints. I taught art for the Department of Defense schools while I was there. And I started in high school and then ended up in elementary and middle school. And on weekends, Claude would grab me, we'd hit the train, and we'd go to the dirty bookshops in Japan where they had stacks of antique Japanese woodblock prints. And we would just go through them. And he would show me, this is good, look for this. And sometimes we just held them and said, they're just beautiful. They are just beautiful pieces of paper. Fast forward 2 years. There's this family in Japan called the Yoshida family. Hodaka Yoshida is the middle son, and he is my sensei. He was my teacher in Japan. His father is one of the founders of the Shinhanga movement in Japan. It's the new print movement that started in 1880. When I was 23 years old, I was invited to meet Hodaka Yoshida, and when I walked into his studio, I had no clue that this family was famous. His father, his mother, I am convinced when you go in and look at Fujio Yoshida's flower canna print in there, showed her work in New York City in the 20s. And you can't tell me that George O'Keeffe wasn't in New York at the same time. And look at the relativity between Yoshida's work and O'Keeffe's. She had to have known her. So I had to buy this print. I'm at Ronin Gallery in New York, which represents me in New York City today. And that's where I bought my Fujio Yoshida, was at Ronin Gallery. And my husband was like, you're buying one more woodblock print. But I did in New York. Probably paid too much for it, but it's beautiful. So be sure you take a look at it. It hangs in my studio, and I study it. I have the entire family hanging in the studio, from the father, Hiroshi, 2 sons, Toshi, Hodaka, my teacher, Hodaka's wife, Chizuko, woodblock printmaker. Think of the Andrew Wyeth family in America. This is the Andrew Wyeth family of Japan. The entire family is that well known and that famous. I had no clue when I walked into Hodaka's studio. I had tea with Fujio, the mother. She died at 100. That is fascinating to me. And studying with Hodaka was a change of life. What is a woodblock print? Why is it different than anything else? And why on God's green earth would a Texas girl go to Japan and pick up a process that takes hours? Spend on my little dragonfly that someone said, how long did that take you to make that little dragonfly tonight? And I said, about 6 or 7 weeks. And it's this big. And it has 7 different wood blocks that I carved for it. And I paint watercolor mixed with rice paste on the wood. And then I press my paper against the block, and that transfers the color from the wood to the paper. It is a wood block print. The larger pieces that you see in there, there were a couple earlier that were standing and looking, and I said, well, I bet you've never seen the Highway 87 between La Mesa and Lubbock in a Japanese woodblock print. And there it is. And I've got this little barn, and there's this strange sky that you look through when you see the barn. Those are the high wires. When you're driving down the road, you know they zip by constantly, the high wires. They had to be part of that little barn print. The other thing you see are plowed cotton fields. Why not a plowed cotton field in a Japanese woodblock print by a Texas artist? Let's do it. But those pieces are very, very time consuming. When you look at my work, the size of the print is the size of the wood blocks that I have to carve. So this is not an easy process. This is why you don't see many Westerners doing traditional Japanese woodcut. It is a time sink. I love it. What you look at in the exhibition that Matt curated is a body of a part of my work. I have been doing Japanese classic woodblocks since 1974. 48 years of my life has been devoted to this process. Why? This is an art form that cannot die. This art form has to stay alive. It is so absolutely exquisite. Yes, it's Japanese, but why can't a Texan come in and take a process, do imagery that is relevant, that I live in every day and love it, and put it out to the world? It's still Texas. People who don't know the process will look at my West Texas field and go, well, you know, I know that must be out on a road out by Lubbock, but what's Oriental about it? It's the technique. It's the process. It's the way the ink is gradated from light to dark. There was a gentleman in here who's walking around. Do you have your Hokusai watch on or your Hiroshi? He has his Hiroshi on. A watch. There are things that are done in Japanese prints that are iconic, that Americans know. The Great Wave is a big example of Kanagawa. I was at a show at the Blanton Museum. It was a show of Dur etchings, and what the print curator, Holly Lorham, that's my printing assistant, Sindel, helping me here, she paired collections from the Blanton with Dur's work, people who copied him. I came back from that exhibition. I'm driving back to my ranch, looking at my longhorns, and I went, I'm going to do the Great Wave. Oh my God, I had no clue what I just said. What can an artist learn by copying a master? You learn from masters. So I have done the Great Wave, and I did pretty darn good at it too. It's not a Texas scene, and I give Hokusai credit on the print because it is his work. After I did that print, my work shifted. Look at what happens when you copy a master learning from a master. I am still learning. I am not done yet. This is not my process. This is the Japanese process. And I want to keep it alive, and I want to continue it. What I add is me. When I see a landscape or I see an architectural structure that gives me an oh my God feeling, a wow feeling. I do lots of photographs, and I want to translate that into my work. Number one, visually, my work is very different than the Japanese. Number two, my color use. Someone tonight said, oh, yours is the one that's all full of the really bright color. The Japanese prints don't have as much color. I want intensity in my color. Curiously enough, just a few years ago, I learn every day. A few years ago, I found a pigment company in New York City, Wear a Paint. Do you know Wear a Paint? You should check Wear a Paint out. It is amazing. Problem is, it's really expensive. It is Japanese pigment used for Japanese woodblock prints. So I decided, okay, let's use that, and is it going to shift anything? My work only got more intense. The color is phenomenal. It depends on, I use rice paste in my work. Japanese use a lot of rice paste in their work, which makes it very subtle and very soft sometimes. Generally, the Japanese only print a color one time. I print colors 2 times minimum. My blacks in these prints, sometimes 3. Sindel in the back, my apprentice. How many times have I printed black the most? 5 goes Miranda, another printer's assistant from Austin. Now, okay, how do you get the paper down on the block in the exact same spot 5 times in a row without messing it up? That's the hard part. So I have what's called a registration mark. It's a right angle and straight line carved on every block from the original design. What messes it up is me. If I shift slightly when I get that paper in the right angle and straight line after I've inked the block, and I run it through my press, I don't use the Baron. In my class tomorrow night, you guys are going to have to use the Baron the way the Japanese did. I did that the first 2 years of my life, so by God, we're going to do that here tomorrow night. I run it through the press, and I shifted it. And you know when it happens? On the very last block, at the very end of the day, after I have spent 9 hours printing 2 prints. So, yes. I just feel like I believe that you can tell my work is a Japanese woodblock, but it is so not like a Japanese woodblock. When Ronan Gallery in New York called me, they were only Japanese classic woodblocks. And I about fell over because this was like 17 years ago they called me. And the owner, Ronnie Newer, said, I want your work in New York. And I was like, I said, let me think about that. And after I hung up and said, are you nuts? What do you need to think about? Well, all of her artists were dead. That's what I needed to think about. I'm very much alive. So it kind of set me back for just a minute. But she said what I'm doing is traditional classic Japanese woodblock. And it is my work, and she wants it with the Japanese prints. It was a huge kudo. Very different than everything else she's got, though. I don't think I've ever followed Hodaka. Hodaka, when I studied with him, was actually doing lots of different print media. He was doing photo silkscreens. If you look at his work in the time period I studied in '74 for a year, he was doing photo silkscreens of houses and fields, and then he would print a woodblock print first, and then he would superimpose this photo etching literally over the top of it. Very different, very abstract. Interesting note, if you look at Hiroshi's woodblocks in the show, Hiroshi is a master woodblock printmaker. That's his father. He died in 1950. I hate to use the word HATE. I say greatly dislike modern work. Hiroshi would not let his kids do abstract work. The day his father died, all of the kids started doing abstract. And they didn't look back. Their father wanted them to be just like him, which is a tradition in Japan. And oh, by the way, I'm going to just say this. I print on the same paper that the Yoshida family prints on. They still make it. It's extremely expensive. It's running around $42 a sheet. It's made from the mulberry tree fiber from a village in Japan called Fukui, and I still get it from Japan. I still use rice paste. My brushes, I've got some new brushes that were made by an American, but most of my brushes are classic Japanese. I stick with the tradition as much as possible because I want this tradition to continue. And yeah, I'm getting ready. I've got the blocks carved and I'm ready to go. We were in Africa last year, so I'm doing a diptych where the Chobe River runs into the Zambezi. And it's very different composition for me. And I'm like, yeah, can't wait to get going on it.
When I was still studying in UTSA in San Antonio, I started working at a children's school. And so it was kids from 2 to 5 years old that I was teaching them art. And from there I was like, I feel the connection with them. Like I I know I want to do something related to kids and how they think and how they react to material, the decisions they make, how they just react, and they don't overthink. They just do things and that's it. Like they made it and they're done. And so I was like, okay, like I want to do that. And then I also am very curious. I'm always touching things. I'm like, if I'm walking, I want to go and touch that. And then when I go to galleries or museums, I'm like, oh, I can touch that and I want to go touch it. And so I was like, how can I do that on my art? So I started exploring and experimenting a lot, as kids do. Like they experiment and they just grab all the materials and just start like mixing everything. And I was like, I have to do that. And so it was like if they were teaching me instead of I was teaching them. And so that's how I started with both of my collections, Momentum, Tactile. And so I was like, okay, texture. I have to add texture to my paintings because that's how I am. Like I always go to places and I want to go and touch them. And so I started experimenting with the material, and I with the colors too, like, and then I would go to, I love going to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy like a bunch of things. And then when I get home, like after a few days, I'm like, what have I done? Like I just bought like a bunch of things and I don't need them. Like what? But then I'm like, okay, I'll store them, and then I'll just like start experimenting and see what I can do. But doing that, going to those Home Depot, it does help a lot for me. A lot of my materials are construction materials for like buildings, and so I use a lot of like shellac, spackling. I use latex paint, so I use a lot of construction material. And so going back to kids, I got married, and then I stopped teaching and I become a full-time artist, and then I had my own kid. And he is the one that really inspired me to do this collection. There's actually a painting of him here in the exhibition. And when I was about to start the getting ready for the exhibition, I was like, where should I start? And I was like, where? And then so I grabbed a box where I have like all the paintings stored for my 3-year-old son, and I was like going through his paintings, and I was like, this is perfect. Like he had the perfect color combinations. He had like really, really like energetic and vibrant colors, and I was like, this is for me. And so I started doing like a mood wall kind of in my studio, and I everything I would see, and I was like, I like that. I started pasting like hanging everything on the wall. I was like, this is my inspiration wall. And sometimes we don't even think, we're just doing things as they tell us to do it. And so when I'm painting, I completely disconnect for that and go like if I'm if I'm a kid. And so I paint on the floor. Like all my paintings, I do them on the floor. So I get all like, I have like a mess when I'm painting, like really like when I was doing this exhibition, I have a video where, because it was really funny, like I wanted to get to the other side of the wall from the studio, and I really had to go like tippy toe, like and then like do like big steps, and I was like, this is crazy, like no one can come here because they're gonna fall or they're gonna like miss one of the paintings. So for my son, I have to like you cannot go to the studio, like it's prohibited for you. And so when I finished during the process of Tiempo, sorry, I was like, where did I left? Okay, so I'm so excited. I want to tell you like all my process. I have so many ideas that I want to tell you everything, but I know I can't because I would keep you here like for hours. Yeah. So and then I use a lot of water too. And it's, I just pour like water and paint, and that's how I start with the Memento, which is the ones that have like water and then a little bit of texture. I just pour the water and I just let it see what happens. Like I have no control, and for me, that's a way of getting loose and just like start and disconnect from everything, like from everyday like lifestyle, and just become like this kid, like on my interior. And what I like about pouring a lot of water in my paintings is that it takes a lot for it to dry. Sometimes it might take like a week, like a day, or just a few hours. And then I add a lot of layers. So it could take like a week for it to finish until I feel like it's done. I follow a lot of my instinct. If I just see it and I'm like, I feel the connection, it's like, I just want to leave it like that. Like it stays like that. And if I'm like, no, like I still, like I see I can put something else, I'll put something else. But Tiempo, it's because the time it takes, like the process of when the time and the process of when I'm painting, it's like I'm in this time, this moment of connection with myself, and I just feel like really free, like no rules in my studio. And then I also do when I'm getting bored, and like I'll start doing games. Like I'm by myself, but I'll start doing games, and I'll start like, okay, I'm a right-handed, and I'm like you feel like your brain is controlling everything with your right hand, and I'm like, no. I'll stop, and then I'm like, I'll use my left hand, or I'll use both hands at the same time, or sometimes I use my feet. I just get like a brush, and I'm like, and so I try to do those games so that I don't get used to doing the same things every day, and there's like something different for me, and there's excitement for me. I always wanted to do furniture, but I never knew how. And with this exhibition, I felt like it was the perfect time, Tiempo, to do furniture. And since children have a lot of influence in my artwork, I was like, I'm going to do a low table because I want for people to feel like they're like, they go back to their memories when they were children, or just disconnect from everything and just relax and have a fun time. And then I also wanted to be low because when you sit down, you can see everything from an angle as a kid sees it, which is very different. My particular, because the idea, I got it from my son. So he's always, he grabs sometimes my phone, and he takes pictures. Like sometimes I'm looking at my pictures, I'm like, what's this? And he might have like 50 pictures on my phone. I'm like, when did that happen? Like I always have my phone, but I don't know what happened. And so he's always taking pictures from those angles, and like from like a lower angle. And I was like, that's perfect. Like that goes perfect with my table and the chairs. Like I want that. I want people to feel like they're in their childhood, and then I have the puzzles too, which we are selling also the puzzles. And so we have puzzles that they have images of one of the artworks. And I want people also to feel like they can play. Like if they're sitting on their table, they can play, they're having like a fun time. And then I have the candies, which are Mexican candies. The idea for me was that I wanted people to get a little bit of my background too. When I would go to the piñatas when I was younger, I would eat those candies. So I chose the candies that I really like to eat, and the ones that I would get like on the piñatas. And so when people come and visit and enter the exhibition, I want them to feel yeah, this is mine. Like I can get this. I can sit down. I can play. I can talk. I decided to do the table brown because I like the idea of having like a conversation, like everyone can sit down. There's no end to the table, so everyone could have like an opinion, can play and talk and eat.